Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel, and on today's video I think I've got a good one for you. Or at least this is a shoe that I have been excited to review since I first saw it, and I first saw it at TRE in November of 2024. And to be perfectly honest, what I really liked about it is that the midsole had all these waves. I just think the design was really nice. Like, the color maybe wasn't my favorite, but I thought it was a good looking shoe. And this is a Skechers shoe that is made to run fast. So has this shoe fulfilled my expectations, or has all my excitement been for nothing? Guys, this is my review of the SKECHERS AERO Tempo. Let's get into it. First of all, I do just want to say thank you to Skechers. They were good enough to send me this pair of the Aero Tempo for the purpose of review. However, they haven't told me what to say. They don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, if you want to pick up a pair of the Aero Tempo for yourself, you can for $170. And of course, I will place a link in the show notes below in case you want to pick up a pair of the Aero Tempo for yourself. Okay, so let's jump right in. And I'm going to jump right in with a negative. And the negative was apparent the second I put my foot in. Now, me, Skechers seem to run a little big in that I have to wear a US men's size 12. And of course, if you know me, if you've been watching a few of my videos, then you know that typically I will wear anywhere between a 12 to a 13, but definitely more on the 13 end. And with every other Skechers shoe that I've used, I have worn a US men's size 12, and it's been absolutely fine. In fact, most recently, we have the Aero Spark and the Aero Burst. And these were both very good shoes, and I have a US men's size 12 in both of them. And they fit very well. Like, they fit how they should. However, when I put my foot into the Aero Tempo, I just found it was very tight, especially here in my toe box. And when I first put them on, I wondered to myself, can I actually wear these to go out for a run? But of course, I did take them out for a run, and I can tell you that it was the type of tightness that goes away once you're not thinking about it. So even though I think a size 12 for me is too small, at least in the volume, not in the length, when I was running, the feeling that they were too small kind of went away. So I don't know, take that for what it's worth. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. Like, I don't want you to buy a pair of shoes that is too small just because you're probably going to forget about it on the run. No, that's not how we buy shoes. Now, on the Skechers website, they don't have half sizes. So in fact, I would have to go up to a US men's size 13 in the Aero Tempo. And I think that would probably fit me a lot better. But this testing today, my review is based on the US men's size 12. And as I said, when I was running in it, the fact that they just seemed a bit small didn't really come into any of my decisions about the shoe. But of course, every time I put them on, I've probably taken this shoe out 7 or 8 times, and every time I put them on my feet, I thought, oh, it's a bit tight here in the forefoot, but everything else seemed okay. So the length was okay. I didn't have any issues with the heel, but there it is. Just, guess my advice is try before you buy. If you know what size you wear in a Skechers, no, I'm not even going to say that. If you have never worn a pair of Skechers, I am going to say go true to size, because that will get you one size up from where I am right now, and I think it'll probably fit you quite well. So as far as specs, the Skechers Aero Tempo has 37 in the heel, 33 in the forefoot for a 4mm drop. Oh, by the way, if you didn't know what this shoe is for, I guess the name Aero Tempo kind of gives it away, maybe it's for tempo runs, and yes, it is. This is Skechers' idea for a shoe for faster workouts and race day. So at the moment, this is pretty much the tip of the spear. This is the race day option from Skechers. Okay, so keep that in your mind as we go through the review. Now, Skechers claims that in a US men's size 9, the Aero Tempo will tip the scale at 8.5 ounces or 241 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 12, it'll tip the scale at 10 ounces even or 283 grams. But just keep that in mind. While 283 grams seems quite light actually, or it seems right in line for a training shoe for my size. Remember, I should be wearing just one size bigger, so it's going to be just a bit heavier, But I'm going to want you to keep that in mind when we look at some of the comparables to the Aero Tempo. So right off the bat, even if we do add a little bit of weight to my size, I think the weight is actually quite good. Right? Skechers has a fairly light shoe. Now, it's not the featherlight race day shoes that we're seeing from a lot of other brands, but also remember, $170. The Aero Tempo is priced in that workout price range, that up-tempo kind of crossover race day shoe price range. Before we get onto the materials and everything, just one more thing about size. And remember, I already said that the toe box was quite tight. Skechers generally has a very low volume upper. And by that, I mean that the upper just seems very fitted and the heel just seems very shallow. So where some shoes, I think the upper would come up just slightly higher around my ankle, Skechers shoes tend not to. While that makes absolutely no difference when I'm out on the run, it's one of those things that just goes away. Again, when I put my foot in, it almost feels like there is less shoe than I'm expecting. I hope that makes sense. But let's start at the top of this upper and we're going to work our way down to the midsole. And look, yeah, this heel collar, this is what we would expect from an up-tempo to race day shoe. It is very thin. The padding is recessed from the top of the heel collar and we end up with just a little thin piece of kind of faux suede right around the top of the heel collar. And then the padding, well, the padding is, it's a kind of like a bolster padding, right? And it kind of comes around like a horseshoe around the back of your heel, but the padding does extend quite a bit far forward. In fact, I think you can probably see it right here. The padding comes up to about here, but the padding isn't over the top. And by that, I think that's a nice way of saying there isn't much padding in there. So I think even though this is a low volume upper, I think for some of you, you might experience a little bit of heel slip just because there is not a lot of padding here to hold the shoe in place against your ankle. Now, with that said, I didn't experience any heel slip, but to be perfectly honest, I don't often experience a lot of heel slip. So I don't know, maybe I have like just chunky heels that just stop that from happening. And then the heel counter on the Aero Tempo is just, it's very flexible. There's no piece of plastic in there to keep it nice and rigid, which is no surprise because a lot of brands tend to do that, you know, just to save a bit of weight, or that's just the style that they're going for. However, if you did experience heel slip in the Aero Tempo, we do have this extra lace hole right at the top, so you could do that lace lock and that'll really hold you in place. The upper is a very light and breathable woven TPU mesh. And yes, it's extremely light. In fact, when your foot is in, if you have any writing on the top of your socks, you're going to be able to see them through the shoe. I actually don't have any complaints on the upper material. I just maybe wish there was a little more of it, or if there was no way to have more of it, maybe I would choose it to be just slightly stretchy, just to give my foot a little extra feeling that there is room in there. Because if you haven't already picked up on this, the Skechers Aero Tempo is not wide foot friendly, right? If you have wide feet, I would just steer clear of it. Now the tongue is also right in line with what we would expect from a tempo shoe, a workout shoe, a race day shoe. There's a very thin felt tongue. We have a little bit of padding coming down the middle of the tongue, which is actually a quite impressive amount of padding without going over the top. And I didn't experience any hot spots from those laces on the top of my foot. The tongue is perforated throughout, so I found it to be quite breathable. And the tongue is gusseted on both sides. Oh, by the way, on the heel, in order to help you putting the shoe onto your foot, we do have this kind of extended heel pull bit of suede right on the back. I was wondering if it kind of folded down, but it doesn't. It's kind of made to stick up. But yeah, you will be using that just to help you get your foot into the shoe, get a good grip on the back there. Now inside the shoe, the sock liner, and I'm going to take this out for you, but I'm not going to put it back in because it is a bit of a challenge to get it back in. This sock liner is actually quite thick. And look, can I hold that up and you see how thick that is? Yeah, that is a chunky sock liner. And the sock liner is made from Hyperburst Pro. So when you see on the specs that the Aero Tempo has Hyperburst Pro, it is the sock liner that they are referring to. This is very soft. It is a supercritical TPU. And this is going to contribute to a nice soft step-in feel when you first put your foot into the shoe. Now, remember that this soft step-in feel doesn't really last. Well, the soft step-in feel does last, but the softness doesn't actually carry through to the run. But we're going to get more into that in just a second. Okay, so we've got the supercritical TPU Hyperburst Pro sock liner. That is an absolute gem for this shoe. Then we've got the main chunk of midsole foam, which is everything you see here. And this is regular Hyperburst. Now, Hyperburst is a blended supercritical foam. I'm not exactly sure what the blend is, but I would say there's definitely a lot of EVA in here. But even so, remember, a supercritical EVA is a worthy foam, right? Nothing wrong with it. I love supercritical EVA, but it's not entirely clear what it's blended with. And then sandwiched in between this, the Hyperburst and the Hyperburst Pro sock liner is a full-length carbon infused winglet plate. And you can actually get a good view of that winglet plate. I'm going to see if I can not overlay something right away, but I want you to see, yeah, you can actually see that if I open it up. See these bits here in the middle? These are the little winglets that come out, and then the plate is more like a perimeter plate. So it's not a solid plate that's just one piece of carbon fiber that covers the entire sole. It's more like we have an open area in the middle, and then we've got the carbon infused winglet plate comes down the perimeter of the shoe, little pieces that kind of cross over just like that on the forefoot, and then slightly smaller here towards the heel or midfoot. And that is just going to add a little bit of stiffness, a little bit of pop, and really it's going to make it a lot more of a speedy shoe. In fact, the shoe is is quite rigid. In fact, actually, this is the first time I've bent it. The shoe is actually very rigid, which is not surprising, and we'll find out when we talk about ride in just a second, but I did expect to be able to bend it a little more than that. Okay, so that's the midsole setup, that's the shoe. If we come down to the outsole, yes, of course, Skechers is partnering with Goodyear rubber. We have a good amount of outsole rubber on this shoe, which I definitely like to see, because when I'm spending $170 on a shoe that could be used for training, I really want it to be durable. I want it to last. Yeah, I've actually run quite a bit in these shoes, and I am seeing a fair bit of wear here on my heel where I touch down, and then I'm seeing just a little bit of wear through this middle bit. You see how the rubber comes down the center, so I'm seeing wear through the centerpiece and then just up here right in the center of my forefoot. I'm not surprised at the amount of wear I see, and even judging by this back part, I have worn it down flat in one place right here, which again isn't surprising for me, but I'm still going to say that the Aero Tempo is going to last an average amount of miles, and by average I'm going to guess at least 400, and that is for a runner like me. So let's talk about ride, because I gotta say, I was so looking forward to the Skechers Aero Tempo ever since TRE, and wouldn't you know it, I gotta say I was disappointed. I was disappointed in the ride when I first put this on my foot. Because what happens when I first take out a fast shoe? Well, I have to warm up first. So when I take this shoe out for a workout, and look, I took it out for mostly workouts. I think I did take it out for one easy run. For me, the shoe just doesn't really work for an easy run. It works better when you pick up the pace. So I've done intervals and I've done several tempo runs in this shoe. But when I take this shoe out for the first time and I'm warming up and I'm running easy, just trying to get my body warmed up, Skechers Aero Tempo just feels firmer than I like. Now, there are a lot of you out there that really like firm shoes, and maybe you'll be drawn to this a little more, but for me it's just a little too firm, at least in those easy miles. Now look, the good thing is that changes when you want to run fast. When I want to run fast, I do want something a little firmer, right? I want to have that illusion of road feel. It is very rare that a very soft shoe actually picks up the pace and feels good at kind of race paces. So not a easy day shoe, but we knew that, right? Skechers has already told us that this is an up tempo or a workout shoe and a race day shoe. So obviously it's going to be better at speed. And it 100% was. As soon as I start picking up the pace and I start settling into, let's say, a tempo pace, the shoe disappears on my foot and I can actually focus on the shoe like I do when I'm trying to get more out of a shoe. Does that make any sense? So when I'm tired and I'm running fast, I want to imagine, right, the shoe is doing the work. And I imagine the snap, and I imagine the bounce, and I imagine the rocker, and I'm just rolling through my gait and running off forward as fast as I can. You know what I mean? Not as fast as I can, but at speed. And it's in those instances that the Skechers Aero Tempo feels really good. It feels like it should feel. It feels fast. And then when I slow down, so in between intervals or when I'm cooling down at the end, I've got to say, I no longer think that the shoe feels too firm to run easy in. But my own impressions can't really be trusted at that point, because at this point I'm actually used to the shoe and I'm just going to be so relieved that I'm slowing down that, the shoe isn't going to bother me whatever I'm running in. But in a nutshell, at speed, the Skechers Aero Tempo does feel really good. It does feel like I have to put more work in to actually make that speed happen, and that's a difficult thing to actually qualify. But I suppose what I mean is that it feels better the faster I go. So I do actually have to put in some work for the shoe to feel like it's giving me something back. If I'm just out for an easy run and then I kind of just pick up the pace a little bit, that doesn't mean that the Aero Tempo is going to feel better at those paces. For me, it feels better when I am intentionally running fast. So would this be a race day shoe for me? It's difficult to say. I mean, it's not difficult to say. I think maybe it would perform well at shorter distances, but for the marathon, for me at least, I don't run fast enough, I think, to get the best out of the Skechers Aero Tempo during a marathon. And that's only because towards the end of a marathon, I'm getting a bit tired and a bit sloppy. I don't think I would be putting the power into the shoe that is needed to really get the most out of it. Okay, but now we've come to the part where you have to think, if you are going to be picking up a pair of the Skechers Aero Tempo, is there anything else that you're going to be looking at? What are the competitors to the Aero Tempo? And for me, for the shoes that I have run in, I think my most comparable shoe is the Asics Magic Speed 4. Now the Magic Speed 4 has quite a bit more stack height. We have 43 in the heel, 35 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. It'll also cost $170, so the same price as the Aero Tempo, and in my size tips the scale at 289 grams. Now remember, this was 283 grams, but we do have to go up, so in all likelihood the Aero Tempo is going to be a couple of grams heavier than the Magic Speed 4 in my size. And I thought this was the most comparable based on the feel of the ride. Both are fairly firm when running easy, and you really have to put the work in to get some performance out of these shoes. Next up, I think you're probably also looking at the Adidas Boston 13. Now the Boston 13 is only $160. I say only, it's a lot of money, I know. But the Boston 13 is $10 less than the Aero Tempo. It has 36 in the heel, 30 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. And in my size, it tips the scale at 310 grams. So yes, it's quite a bit heavier than the Aero Tempo. But again, we have to add, at least a little bit to the Aero Tempo to make it a fair comparison. Now, if I'm honest, I think maybe the Aero Tempo is more comparable to the Boston 12. I think my impression of the Boston 13 is that it's softened up a bit this year, but I would be using these shoes for the same type of runs. Now, Adidas generally runs narrow, so I think the fit is probably going to be very similar between these two. And finally, you might also be looking at the Nike Zoomfly 6. Now, the Zoomfly 6 is the same price as the Aero Tempo, $170. The Zoomfly 6 has 42 in the heel, 34 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. And in my size, the Zoomfly 6 tips the scale at 312 grams. So very similar to the Boston 13 and probably only slightly heavier than my correct size in the Aero Tempo. Now, again, the Zoomfly 6 is a Nike, so it's generally going to fit narrow-footed runners a little better than wide-footed runners. So I think the same type of people, the same type of feet are going to be looking at both of these shoes. However, in my experience, the Zoomfly 6 just feels a little better at all paces, not just when I'm picking up the pace, as is the case in the Aero Tempo. But when we're buying shoes like this, we are buying them to put the work in. So perhaps it's not totally fair to say that a shoe runs better at a slower pace when we're looking at a fast shoe. So guys, what do you think of the Skechers Aero Tempo? Is it something that you're thinking about picking up? I gotta tell you, and I've already told you, I'll tell you again, I'm a little disappointed in the Aero Tempo, and that's mainly because the Aero Blaze and the Aero Spark were just so good. Like, they were better than I expected. And I think maybe this is a lesson for me in just tempering my expectations, because I really didn't expect anything of the Aero Burst and the Aero Spark, but I did of the Aero Tempo. And the Aero Tempo is the only one that I was a little disappointed in. But that's it for me for today. This has been my review of the Skechers Aero Tempo. Be kind, be happy, run well. See you in a couple days.